Hello, welcome to Web of Stories. My name is Melinda, and this is the fourth, I believe, update for my short story September. This is the last full update, some point early in October. I don't know the date because it's the beginning of month, end of the month, and there's other posts that I do around then, so I've got to kind of fit it in. But I'll do a wrap up of the last few books that I read for short story September, and then sort of a quick overview. But as for right now, this is the last full update. And this was an interesting one for a couple reasons. Last week I was behind. I am now caught up, at least as of yesterday. I haven't read a short story yet today. I'm doing this in the morning. But I am caught up, which was kind of a surprise, but I will get to that. So this week I read 8 short stories. The first one I read was Family Furnishings by Alice Munro. I gotta be honest, I remember really enjoying this. Oh yeah, I do. I was like, I don't remember the story, but now I do. This is about a young woman, and she's talking about this eccentric aunt-like character she had. I think it was actually like her parents' cousin, who sort of chose to live a life that wasn't what was expected by her family, and this narrator's sort of relationship with her, which wasn't as solid as one would think, and it made this character question her own place in the world. I thought it was really interesting. Again, not super memorable because all of a sudden I had just forgotten it until I looked really quickly and saw like a character's name and remembered. But beautifully written. I really like the characters. I could totally see where the narrator was coming from. I wanted to know more about Elfrida, who was the sort of aunt-like character. It was one of those stories where you think there's a lot more under the surface that you don't get in this story, which is fine. That works. That's great. But yeah, it was a good solid story by Alice Munro. So that was Family Furnishings. And then I read According to Solomon by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. And this was kind of one of those really, like, you could tell this one was subversive. So it's basically this woman, her husband's name is Solomon, and he has a view of what should make her happy and what her role in the world should be, and that is not what she wants. And it's not what makes, and she probably doesn't even realize that's not what makes her happy. That's not something she wants. And so it's kind of an interesting study of that. It's short. Most of the stories in this particular book are pretty short, which is nice because, you know, I'm getting some big ones here. But I liked it. Charlotte, I'm really looking forward to reading the rest of the stories in this collection because for the most part, there has been one that didn't work for me, but they're really kind of thought-provoking. And they're thought-provoking from a modern sensibility, but these were written the late 19th, early 20th century, which is like, they must have been really kind of out there then. So, and then we start getting a little bit weird. A friend of mine said she had read at one point a story by Roald Dahl, my friend Karen, and it just stuck with her. She never forgot it. I forgot the title of that, but I got a collection of short stories by Roald Dahl. So this collection is Skin, and I read the first story, which is Skin, which is about this guy who it is after, I believe it's after World War II, and he had been an artist. He'd fallen on hard times. And when he was in those more prosperous times, he was a tattooist, but he was living with this artist, and he got this artist to tattoo on his back. And he goes into a gallery, and everybody wants that piece of art. It's definitely unsettling at the end. This is library puts it as YA. I don't know if this is actually because it is YA or because it's Roald Dahl that they put it in YA. But it was interesting. It's definitely darker. If you've only read, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and James and the Giant Peach and Mathilda, this is definitely darker. But it was interesting, very readable, not very long. I'm looking forward to I'm going to continue with this collection because this was fun. And then I've mentioned this story in a past video, and now I have actually the title, Kushtuka, and it's out of this collection, Never Whistle at Night. This collection has a publication date of October 10th. I pre-ordered it. It showed up early from Bookshop. And the introduction is by Stephen Graham Jones. I think I said in my other video he was like the editor, but he's not. He wrote the introduction. But these are dark tales, so horror stories written by Indigenous authors. And this first one is by Mathilda Zeller. And she is from the Kabuk River Valley, which is in Alaska, which makes sense because this is a story set in the Alaskan Native community. It's chilling. Like, I didn't find it scary because, again, unless Stephen King writes it, I usually don't find books don't scare me, but it was unsettling. And I know that if anyone had done a visual adaptation of this, like a movie or a TV show or whatever of this, it would scare the poopy out of me because it is unsettling. And I was very, very impressed. And one thing I like about this collection is that they frequently, lots of times when you get these anthologies, at the end, there's a huge section talking about each of the authors. This one puts it right at the end of each story, so it's easy to see. And let me see if I can find where this one was originally published, if it is. I'm not seeing it on this. Oh, no, it was originally published in this anthology. So this is the only place you're going to find that story, which is Kushtuka. And I don't know if Mathilda Zeller has written anything else. I hope she does, because this was a fantastic story. This is also the book that was edited by my friend's nephew's wife, who she also lives with. So that's really exciting. It's another one of the books that she's edited that I liked. So keep an eye out for this anthology. Highly recommend it. Can't wait until it comes up in my rotation again so I can read the next story. Then a new author. This is Edna O'Brien. Priscilla at Evening Reader had been reading Edna O'Brien, so I happened to pick up a book of hers. And this is Shovel Kings. So this is about an Irish person. I don't know if the narrator is ever identified as being male or female. So the narrator, who is Irish, but lives in London, meets up with this another Irishman who lives in London, and the Irishman's telling this person about his life and the group he grew up with, and in London. Not really, he was from Ireland, but he came to England and was working hard, kind of a hard scrabble group of people and doing construction, and kind of what happens with that. Interesting story. I had some construction issues with this. Just in the style that it was written, basically no quotation marks, I kept losing who was actually speaking, which was frustrating. It was good enough so I'm going to keep going with this. And I do see in like later stories, if I thumb through here, I actually see quotation marks. So it's not a universal thing, but that is, there are times when I don't have a problem with it, but lots of times when they don't use quotation marks, they somehow indicate in another way that it's someone else speaking. And she doesn't really do that in the story. So it was very confusing for me, which is too bad because the story itself was interesting. But I'm going to keep going with Edna O'Brien. Oh, then I pulled this one that I got out of my library, which is the Best American Short Stories, 2016, edited by Junot Diaz. And we have issues with Junot Diaz, but that's okay, because the story I read out of here was not by Junot Diaz. This was by one of my favorite authors, Louise Erdrich, and it's called The Flower. It was originally published, I believe, in The New Yorker, something like that. I should have looked that up. Anyway, it was published elsewhere and then put in this. And it was a really interesting story. It was set back in the 19th century. Sort of the narrator is a young man who's like the younger son in a New England family, so he doesn't get much of an inheritance. His family, they own a bakery, so he has skills to be a baker, but he has other like mathematical business skills. So he goes out to help a trapper, to work kind of as an assistant for a trapper. And at one point, the trapper, a native woman comes, who has been brutalized by her husband, comes and basically sells her daughter to him. And it's pretty clear that this is like the best worst case scenario for this woman. Like, no, she doesn't want to do that, but what else is she going to do, sort of thing. And this New England gentleman really has an issue with this. And he forms a tie with the young native woman. And it was an interesting story because I kept feeling like she's not going to do, Louise Erdrich is not going to do white savior. She does not do the white savior trope. But there are times when you kind of think she's going that way, and then she subverts it, and then she goes someplace else. it's got some interesting imagery in it. Some interesting things happen in it. You're not quite sure what is real and what isn't real. But I really liked it, but it's Louise Erdrich, so I expected to really like it, and it totally paid off. And at least one, I have 4 of these books out right now, and at least one other one, there's a Louise Erdrich story. And then I'm picking up another one today, the library, which might have Louise Erdrich in it. But I'm going to try to read something not by Louise Erdrich next, just because I want to spread the wealth. Okay, so the next story was my accidental short story. When I do Sue Jackson's Big Book Summer, I always joke that I have accidental big books. Like, I have the big books that are usually print books that I set aside. I'm going to read these during the summer. I know they're big books. But then I have these digital books that I get from the library or wherever. Maybe I own them, whatever, but I don't know how long they are when I read them. And then when I finish them and I go to put them into my spreadsheet and I look to see how many pages they are, I realize they're a big book. So they're my surprise big book. Well, I had a surprise short story. So the same sort of thing. This story was Address Unknown by Katherine Kressman Taylor. It was originally published under the name Kressman Taylor for reasons that I will get to. So I had first heard about this story, but although I thought it was a novel, on Greg at Supposedly Fun at his channel. And I was really intrigued by it. And then it also came up in my comments. And I'm sorry, I forgot to write down who recommended it in my comments. Sorry. But I had 2 recommendations on it. And I was like, well, this sounds really interesting. I knew that it was a contemporary-ish to World War II novel. Again, I thought it was a novel. So I went and put a request in the library. Request came in. I started reading it. I read the whole thing, including the foreword and the afterword, in half an hour. So it's a short story. My surprise short story. But that's okay. Let me tell. So I knew going into this story that it was about 2 friends. One was Jewish, and one goes back. They're in San Francisco, and one goes back to Germany before World War II. I had made the incorrect assumption that it was the Jewish friend that went back to Berlin. It was not, which is, I mean, a good thing, because if you're Jewish in 1938, San Francisco is a lot better than Berlin. But it's the non-Jewish friend. So that's kind of the setup. Let me get a little bit more into let me kind of go back a little bit with the story. So I was also under the misconception that this was a European novel, like someone in Europe had written this novel. Dressing from the author's name, I thought was probably someone in Britain. But when I went and looked up the author, she was actually from Portland, Oregon. So she was a local author. Wow. Again, it was published under the name Kressman Taylor, not Katherine Kressman Taylor originally, because it was so shocking, bold, upsetting, that they didn't think that it would be proper for a woman to have published it. So they took her first name off to make it ambiguous. The story is based on sort of something that she had seen or heard of or witnessed, a situation where there were 2 friends. One was Jewish, one wasn't. That one went to Germany, came back to the United States, and then refused to talk to the Jewish friend. So she developed this story. And the 2 friends own an art gallery. It is implied in the narrative that they came to the United States during or after aroundish World War I. We're in 1938, which is, by the way, when this book was published. This book was probably written in 1937, 38, published in 1938. One friend, the not Jewish friend, moves back to Berlin. And then we have an epistolary novel between these 2 friends. And I'm going to jump back to a story I read earlier this month, which is The Werewolf by Alma Katsu. And that one was a very modern story. Alma Katsu says in her little afterword that she was inspired by January 6th to write this story, but it's about the radicalization. And it uses the form of a fairy tale to tell this story. Address Unknown is almost more terrifying because it doesn't use, it's realistic. It does not use a fairy tale to tell this story. And it's also terrifying when you think about it. It was written without the knowledge of what would happen. I mean, Amakatsu wrote her story looking back, where we already have a very a very full, I don't know if it's 100, no one will know ever if it's completely full, but a very full picture of what happened during World War II. Katherine Kressman's Taylor story was written before World War II even began. And she's written about things that were happening that day when she wrote it. So the one friend's in Germany, he moved with his family, and it's very close. Like, this guy's children call the other guy Uncle Max, and and Max is the friend in San Francisco. And this starts out, and the first letter from the friend in Germany is like, things are kind of weird here. I'm a little uncomfortable with kind of what's going on. This is weird. Hey, the kids say hi to Uncle Max. This is what's going on. So Max writes back. He's like, hey, I kind of heard about this Adolf Hitler guy. It's kind of creepy. And then the friend writes back and he says, I should say right now, I'm probably going to spoil pretty much the story. You're going to know how it goes, but short stories, it's hard to avoid spoilers. And I really want to talk about this in a way. But you kind of know how the story's going to go. The friend writes back, and then he's saying, look, I had to join the party for professional reasons. And then it starts getting a little bit more. It's like, I know you aren't like the Jews, but the Jews are really bad. And I know you aren't like them. And then it's like, you can't help it because you start getting this, and you start seeing this character start to turn, and it gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And the friend, Max, the friend in San Francisco, is completely shocked by this. He does not understand it because, this is his friend. This is someone who is almost like a brother to him, and is now telling him, don't write to me. I don't want to have anything to do with you because you are a Jewish person and therefore awful. And, which is horrible. I mean, this was something that was happening. But in more modern times, I could tie it back. I'm going to be a little bit vague here just for privacy reasons, but someone close to me, there is someone close to me who is Republican. In early 2016, I was speaking to him, and he was talking about because that's when they had like 20 people running for the Republican nomination. And he's like, Donald Trump is a joke. He needs to get out of here. He's an embarrassment to this country. Why is he even doing this? Just on and on and on and on. By November 2016, he was full on MAGA. So, there's always that, people tie the MAGA movement to the Nazi movement, and then there are people who think that's stupid, whatever, but I'm like, you can't get away from it. And I'm not saying it's just hard. And it's frightening. It makes what I'm seeing going on in this country even more terrifying when I read a story like this. All that being said, this is a fantastic story, and I highly recommend it. It has been republished on its own. It is a short story, so if you go expecting a novel, you will be surprised. As I was, but that's okay because it got me caught up with my story. But that is a fantastic story, and that's Address Unknown by Katherine Kressman Taylor, Portland author. And then finally, the last story I read in this chunk was Life Ceremony, which is the title story from this one. And it took almost half the book, but we finally got cannibalism. Oy, oy, oy. So this Life Ceremony story is weird. I expect weird. I do expect weird. But I kind of preface that because we had the story in here, Poochie, where the girls have like a middle-aged man as a pet, which was like, wow, that's bonkers. But we also had the first story in this where they're using first-rate material, where they're using human body parts to make, I'm sorry, my husband's making noise in the other room. Or they use body parts to make furniture, which is like, that's weird, but I understand what she's saying. Life Ceremony is like that. So we're at some point in the future in this story, and the birth rate has dropped, the population has dropped. There are still humans, it's just smaller, and birth rates. And it's happened pretty quickly because this main character, she's talking about, when she was young, and she's not old. She is childbearing age, so she's probably no older than 40. She's probably in her 30s. I can't remember if they say how old she is in the book. She remembers being a child, and the idea of eating a human being was really gross, which, yeah. But now, as an adult, that is the accepted way. When someone dies, you have a life ceremony where their body is cooked up and everybody comes and eats it. And then they go and they have insemination, which just means they kind of just go off with someone and have sex, and they do insemination. That's what it's called. She even makes a point, like, she's like, we used to call it making love, and now we call it insemination. And she just does not like it. She thinks it's really weird. And she has a friend who also thinks it's really weird. Their boss dies and they have to go to this party, and they're like, this is just weird. And they talk about the scenes after it where the second part of that whole ceremony, insemination part, let's just say there's remains left everywhere that they slip in. And she and her friend are just like, this is, weird. The idea of this is that, you consume this past life that brings forth new life is kind of the idea behind it. Anyway, so then it finds out that her friend is killed. This friend who's kind of commiserating with her. And then plot ensues. Or what happens basically is they have a life ceremony for him. She questions her beliefs, and that's sort of like an ongoing theme in this. This is definitely the weirdest. And I think the weirdest part of this was I wasn't as weirded out as I probably should have been. But it was strange. I knew I was going to get cannibalism at some point. I mean, just looking, I don't know if you can see the cover. Kind of that looks like a heart, and that looks like something else. I kind of knew cannibalism was coming. So yeah, I finally hit the cannibalism part. Anyway, that was the last of the 8 books that I read since my last update. Again, I should have 4 books in my next update, which will be at some point. I might wrap it in to my weekly update. I don't know. We'll see. I might wrap it into another video. I might do its own video. I haven't figured that out yet. But yeah, Short Story September is coming to an end. It's been really fun. I am in the middle of all these anthologies. I'm not going to include this one, but the other ones, I'm kind of in the middle of them. And I think I'm going to continue with them. So I said in an earlier video, I will probably continue to do roughly a short story a day. I'm not going to sweat it if I miss a day. I'm not going to sweat it if I end up reading 2 stories by the same person in a row after September. But I am going to work my way through the rest of these and the anthologies that I have in progress, because I am really enjoying them. Edna O'Brien, I'm going to see. I've only read one in this, and it hasn't been super successful. So I'm going to give her a couple more tries. If I DNF this, that's fine. But yeah. So that's Short Story September. Thank you for hanging out. If you made it all the way to the end, you got the cannibalism story. Yay! It seems fitting that my husband is cooking in the other room as I'm talking about cannibalism. But if you made it this far, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and come visit me on my new Discord, because we want to talk about things and it'll be fun. We'll just hang out. Fun. Yeah. So thank you very much, and I will see you next time. Bye.